My name is Lauren Bryan, and I'm the Executive Director of Oregon Repertory Singers, and I am so thrilled that you all have decided to spend your Tuesday evening with us for this very exciting and new event. Now, many people have asked us how or why we decided on doing the Sperry Sessions. So for those of you who don't know, Ethan Sperry is celebrating his 10th year as Artistic Director of Oregon Repertory Singers. In a year where he would have programmed music that was meaningful to him, likely by composers he admires, we felt that the Sperry Sessions allowed him to still focus his efforts in programming in the same way. We just execute it in a much different way. And that's what brings us here today for this live stream event. Now, before we jump into the heart of our event today, we have a few housekeeping items. This 1 hour live stream event is being recorded and will be posted to our website at the conclusion of this event at orsingers.org. So if you want to see that whole flip up at the beginning, go ahead and you can watch that again. And we are saving time at the end of this live stream event to take audience questions. So if you have questions or comments during any part of this event, please type them into the chat function, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, and we will do our best to get to as many of those questions as we can. Now, a little birdie did tell me that Dr. Lauridsen is willing to stay on just a little bit longer than the 1 hour mark to keep answering questions, which is so generous of him. And now I have a few groups of people I'd like to thank and acknowledge. So first, our music literature sponsors. Those music literature sponsors are those who gave at the $2,500 or more level at our 2020 gala back in February. They raised their paddle and made a commitment to support our music in the 2020-2021 season. However, due to COVID-19, we weren't able to have the season we hoped for. But we do recognize these supporters, and we look forward to continuing to recognize these supporters for their great contribution to choral music in our city. The Sperry Sessions are sponsored by these generous contributors who support not only the music, but the artists, the composers, and the conductors behind the music. I also want to take a quick moment to acknowledge and thank our GEM supporters. These are donors who have committed to giving every month. They are providing ORS with the sustaining power and predictable revenue every month amidst a very unpredictable year. We are so grateful to the steadfast troop of treasured GEM supporters. Now, if you enjoyed this session and want to see more virtual ventures like these, for example, we are also currently piloting a youth musicianship program that we'd love to see extended into 2021. Or if you just want to see ORS stay relevant during this extremely challenging year, please consider a year-end tax-deductible gift to Oregon Repertory Singers. Arts organizations in our city and across our state need support from enthusiasts like you who believe in the power of music, culture, and arts to build a stronger community. To make a gift, you can visit orsingers.org to make a one-time or recurring gift before December 31st. And now, I am thrilled to get this show started and welcome Artistic Director Ethan Sperry to our show. Welcome, Ethan.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for figuring all of this out. It's amazing.
Why not have a few slip-ups? Let's get that out of the way and let's move on with the rest of the show. But before I sneak away, I do want to extend our gratitude and congratulations on behalf of everyone who supports Oregon Repertory Singers, including our singers, our donors, our board of directors, our staff, for your 10 years as artistic director. We are very lucky and grateful for all that you've brought to this organization over the last 10 years. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. I wish we could be doing all this in person so you could all be watching me hold my microphone awkwardly with two hands like I do when I normally talk to an audience, but at least I could see who would be out there. But thanks for helping facilitate this and set this up.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for being here. We've got almost 200 people on, so we are so excited. Have a great show. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Lauren. So, music in COVID time. Choral music is about what humanity can do when we join together, and how much beauty we can create when we just join our voices. I put a sarcastic comment on Facebook the other day that more than one person talking at the same time is called chaos. This was after a recent debate that we saw on television. But more than one person singing together is choir. We interact in such a different way. And we get to share emotions and share empathy and share community. And if ever there was a time for choral music, it's now, and we can't bring it to you. And we can't bring it to each other. But I wanted to do something to see if we could still access that space, to feel some kind of connection to something deeper and some form of art, even in the virtual world. So the first place we're going to go is to one of my closest friends and mentors, Morten Lauridsen, who I studied with in grad school at the end of the last millennia, and has brought so much to me and to our entire country. And he's one of our treasures of Oregon. He grew up here in Portland and is one of only 2 Oregonians to have ever won the National Medal of Arts, the presidential honor from the Kennedy Center. The other is Beverly Cleary. He's the only musician from our state that has earned that honor. And I think most of you on this call are either singers or regular audience members. You've had a chance to see him from the stage, and I hope we can access a little bit of what he's brought to us in person. But this is also a chance to go deeper, and I'm so thankful to him for donating his time. As you think about it, I hope you can remember the questions that he's answered before and just ask some new ones and get a chance to go deeper. On the next sessions, we're going to be continuing with other composers you've seen on our stage recently, Joan Shimko and Stacey Phillips. I don't think the internet is the right place for a first encounter. I think it's the right place to take something you already love and explore it even more deeply. And what we're going to talk about tonight with Dr. Lauridsen, I think is he has so many gifts, but the rarest one is how he finds that place of human vulnerability and puts that on stage for us. So we'll see if we can get there. And now, wherever you are, especially since you're muted and we can't hear you, I'm in my office at Portland State. So you're going to have to applaud extremely loudly so I can hear you. Dr. Lauridsen is on his house on San Juan Island up in Washington. So you might have to scream and cheer, but can we please welcome to the virtual stage the one and only Dr. Morten Lauridsen. And now,
be there.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm sitting in my home in the San Juan Islands, overlooking the sea, and I'm just delighted to join you, with whom I've worked for so many years now, all across the country, and my Portland brethren. I have a long history in Portland, Oregon, growing up there, graduating in the first class from Sunset High School in 1961. And so I have a very close attachment to Portland, and of course, especially to your group, which recorded that absolutely superb album with my music and that of several other very gifted composers.
Well, thanks for joining us again. We're going to dive right in with one of my favorite pieces that was on that album. And we've put together just a small video presentation on it to highlight the text. It's the final movement of your Madrigali, the fire songs on Renaissance love poems, the Se per havervi oimè. Where did you find that poem, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, well, the Madrigali, which has a superb live recording on your recent album, Shadows on the Stars album. I'm a great fan, as all choral composers are, of Monteverdi and that gilded age of choral music in the Renaissance. And I decided in the 1980s to write a 20th century version of madrigals using Renaissance texts. And I had done an earlier set of English madrigals. And of course, the English madrigals, for the most part, are very, very different. They are more lighter, fa-la-la sort of business, and Thomas Morley and Carew and these kind of people. But with the Italians, Gesualdo, Monteverdi, especially, you have an opportunity to go very deep into all sorts of compositional areas. They tend to be very dark for the most part, and a lot of them deal with loss of love. And so I wrote the Madrigali, and they're connected, as you know, with what I call the fire chord that begins the piece, which is a glue, a B minor chord with an added ninth, which is a glue that adds all these pieces together. And they're also connected, all of the texts related to fire in a romantic sense. And so the first 5 of this set are a battle to keep a relationship alive. And on this last one, it becomes clear that the battle is lost. And for my setting on this, I took away all the chromaticism and the complicated counterpoint and all that, and simply said it in a very clear and direct way. It's an understanding that all is lost. It's not going to work out on this thing. And I found the text. It was very interesting to me. I needed one more text where the fire motive that connects all of these poems, all of them relate to fire in a romantic sense. I needed one more text, and one day at USC, I went to the library, and I said, Monteverdi is going to have the answer. Went to the library, opened up his first book of madrigals, and found this one. And it was exactly what I needed. And it was actually a very amazing experience. I simply tapped my hat to him and said, thank you for this. I've lost you. I don't know what to do. How am I going to live? And so it's very clear. And I'm very, very fond of this setting, and I'm glad that you're starting this session out with it.
Yeah, me too. And for our guests that are listening, as you're listening, if you know this piece well, or even if you don't, if there's more you want to know about it, type a question into the chat, and it'll get to us, and we can see if we can answer it afterwards. To me, the moment that's so poignant in here, you say it's all is lost, but then you offer your heart anyway. It's sort of that one extra time, even when you know it's all over. Is that,
Yes.
Yeah. You found
yes
that place. And I think at this moment, all of us have been through that so many times. We keep thinking maybe the pandemic won't last another 2 weeks. Maybe like all these things seem lost, and yet we have to keep trying to do what we want to do anyway. And here we are tonight. If there's a song for this moment, this might be one of them. So let's listen to Se per havervi oimè, with text by Monteverdi and music by Morten Lauridsen. Thank you for writing that.
You're very welcome. Very fond of that piece.
Yeah. We're going to move on to a much, much happier love song and one of your most recent pieces. We're going to talk a little bit about Ya Eres Mia.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one that does work out. Tell me about finding that poem and where you were much more recently in life. I guess, good, 30 years after you wrote Se per haver io in me. Finding this other side of love.
Yeah. One of the great joys I've had, of course, as a composer, is combining my great love of music, and especially the sound of vocal music, the sound of choirs and art songs. That's been my focus throughout my career. But it also has combined my second love, which is poetry. As you know, Ethan, on all my classes at USC, the vast majority of them, I taught there for 52 years. I started with a poem. It just takes you up a peg. It focuses you in so many different ways, and we learn so much from poets, and I salute them. And I have chosen the poets throughout my career. Rilke, Neruda, Lorca, Robert Graves, the great texts from the Catholic liturgy, the Christian liturgy, Howard Moss, Dana Gioia, all superb poets. Poetry that teaches us a great deal as human beings and also is so superbly constructed. Well, if you want to go to love poems, go to Neruda. Go to the 100 love sonnets he wrote for his wife. You can get a book with very fine translations on Amazon, $25, translated by a very fine guy from Texas. He wrote 100 love poems to his wife, and I set the first one as part of the nocturnes. When I die, I want your hands upon my eyes. I want to feel their freshness one more time. And it goes on to say, I want you to live while I wait for you to sleep. I want you to flourish. I want you to feel the sun in your hair, the wind on your body, the sand in your feet. And in the meantime, everyone's going to know the music, the reason for my song. It doesn't get any better than that. Well, about 5 years ago, I said another one. And now you're mine. Nobody else. And in the midst of it, fine translation by Dana Gioia, my dear friend, just gets right to it. You're it, nobody else. And I said it in Spanish, and I've done a duet version of it and a choral version of it. And of course, you did the first American recording of Ya Eres Mia, a beautiful poem. I really do urge everybody, listen, go buy the book, read a couple of those poems to your main squeeze, and see what happens.
Well, maybe you're answering the question, but you take these poems that have so much vulnerability about love, whether for better or for ill.
Yeah.
How do you capture that vulnerability in the music? It's so exquisite. Are you able to put that into words, what it is that you find that access to?
I can't not put it into words, but I've lived it. I've loved, I've lost love. Like everybody else, we go through these things, and it's the height of emotions. And these poems, whether you've lost love or gained it, are just deeply felt, and I hope very deeply set by me, trying to capture and do honor to the poetry through my musical settings.
Well, we have a surprise for you, and I think for our audience as well. I'm not sure how many of our audience or even our singers are aware of this, but one of Lauridsen's recent ventures is taking a lot of his best-known choral pieces and giving a new version to them as duets, as vocal duets for two voices and piano. And very often in the choral version, I almost feel that's what it's like. I actually found it a real challenge for the choir, which I'm so pleased at how we conquered this on the album. I'll never forget our final take of that last section. The vulnerability you're asking of two people to say to each other, and now you're mine. But to have 100 people try to say that and mean it as intimately as if it's worth two people. Anyway, we got two of our choir to record the duet version for you. So I don't know how often you've heard this, but this is a married couple in our choir, Lisa and Andy Raffel, who are actually also both Spanish speakers. And Lisa is playing the piano and singing, and Andy is singing. So for all of us, enjoy them singing the duet version of Ya Eres Mía.
Great.
Ya eres mía, ya eres mía. Reposa con tu sueño, reposa en mi sueño. Amor, dolor, trabajos, amor, deben dormir ahora. Irá la noche sobre sus invisibles ruedas, y junto a mí eres pura como el ámbar. Dormido, ninguna más amor, ninguna más amor. Dormirá con mis sueños, iremos juntos, iremos juntos por las aguas del tiempo. Viajará con la sombra conmigo, solo tú siempre viva, siempre sol, siempre luna. Y
Thank you, Lisa and Andy, for taking the time to record that.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much. It's very poignant with two singers doing it. For those of you interested in these duets, I'm very fond of them. There's a mixed duet of Shining Night, of Direton, of Dana Joy's Prayer, of Contre Key Rose, as well as this Neruda. No one's writing duets anymore, and I absolutely love it. And I think my love for the mixed duets happened early on in my life when I became such a fan of the great Broadway musical, where there are so many mixed duets. But it's very, very personal. Two people, a man and a woman, and a piano, singing these great lyrics. And so thank you very much for that lovely performance of the Neruda.
Yeah, and actually, I think just as a choir, I think that's something we find too, is that you've actually tried to let 100 of us participate in pieces as intimate as a duet, instead of feeling like a giant choir. Like the choir can have that kind of intimacy as an instrument. And I guess I'm reading across the bottom, and I'll suggest to any of our audience, if you are enjoying this, consider donating the price of a concert ticket, if that's possible. We're just all trying to keep the arts alive at this moment in time. And I also want to just say a huge thank you to our staff for figuring out all of how to do this video in-house. It's our staff and our board, and including Stephanie Noble, who's been doing some of the videography for this, and it's a great skill set she's doing. But you're going to see one of her videos in just a second. But we're going to transition over to one of the cycles that ORS hasn't really done so much, and that's a little ironic considering where we are, but that's the Chanson des Roses, which was a cycle I was actually considering for our Christmas concert this year, even though those pieces are, of course, not about Christmas. The rose is a Christmas symbol, but of course the rose is a Portland symbol. And so we decided to do a virtual recording, and it's not a virtual choir video, meaning you're not going to see our faces in boxes. We used an application called Soundtrap, which allowed me to do the lead vocal tracks, and then each individual could add their voice, but when they're singing, they can actually listen to everybody else that's already recorded. So it's sort of this additive experience for the choir listening to one another as we build it. And this will be our version of Contre Qui Rose that you're going to hear in a moment. And I know so much what we've talked, you and I, many times about these pieces, and of course, they were premiered right here in Portland, one block from the office I'm sitting in. But I don't know if you want to talk a little bit differently about roses and your wishes for Portland right now, or if you want to talk a little bit about the chanson or how they might feel different in 2020 than when you wrote them.
Well, I think so. Portland's going through a crisis right now, as is Seattle, up in my area right now. It's a tough time for everybody. It is the city of roses. As a young man, I don't know how many times I marched when I was in high school in the rain, playing my trumpet in the Rose Parade. And when Choral Cross Ties, your belatedly no longer extinct group, very, very fine group, decided to do a concert of mine, and they did the Midwinter songs and they did the Madrigali. And it was absolutely spectacularly done. In Portland back in the early 80s. And then they premiered the Rose songs. On that particular program were texts about, in French, in Chanson, in French by Hindemith and Chanson. And I thought it'd be very interesting for an American to get in there as well. And I went to Rilke, who at the very end of his life wrote nothing but 400 poems in French in the Museum, Switzerland. And I set 5 of them. Roses were a huge symbol for Rilke. They permeate his writings. And I always thought it was very ironic, of course, that although he died of leukemia, his death was hastened by a very severe infection he got from a rose thorn at the end of his life. And so these pieces became very, very popular, but they were premiered right there in 1993. I had just turned 50, and I came up to Portland, Oregon to premiere with Choral Cross Ties.
And so tell us about Contre Qui Rose, that particular poem.
Yeah.
This is another one of your most vulnerable pieces.
It absolutely is. Yes. Why are you wounding me? Why do you have those thorns? I am protecting you from your enemies, and yet you are wounding me. Why? It's a poem filled with questions. And musically, I said it in the following way. All of the phrases are unanswered. Harmonically, melodically, whole series of questions. Why? And I set it out very sparsely with a very open, hollow fifth. And it builds up to a very high point, the multi-voice chord. From summer to autumn, I'm protecting you. And it ends with a question as well. It's a very vulnerable piece. It's actually one of my favorites. If I had to name 3 or 4 of my favorites, this would certainly be among them, as would Say Per Havervi, I may. But this is very, very personal to me, and I'm glad that you're including it in this show. And it's, I think, very appropriate to this particular time for Portland, Oregon, which is going through a really rough time with the sorrow on so many levels.
Yeah. And so I guess on behalf of Oregon Repertory Singers dedicated to the city of Portland, here is our virtual performance of Contre qui rose.
Well done. Lovely. Lovely. I could listen to that piece 1,000 times.
Yeah. And yeah, so that's sung all recorded one at a time. And I think
Yes.
it still sounds fairly well like a choir, but hopefully not good enough that it replaces live concerts.
Right.
That's, I guess, been one of my fears about the COVID era. I don't really want to explore virtual choirs that much because I don't really want a replacement for the real live experience.
Right.
Um, and to just share space and time with human beings in the same room is something so precious that I just want to take a moment to value that.
Yes.
And I guess that segues to the next text, to Dire Tant, about the rose being narcissistic. So
yes, I think in a very good way. I've always thought about this poem as being about self-worth. I felt about it. He chides the rose for being self-absorbed in a way, but that's okay as well. This particular piece, which ended the cycle and was actually my first piece that I wrote of the 5-movement cycle on Rose's Les Chansons de Rose. I said it in the style, I thought, of a French folk song. I wanted to write a piece that would be a divertissement in a certain way, kind of to end the session, in that particular concert in the 1990s, to end the half focusing on Chanson. So I wanted to write a little light piece, and so it's a very direct little piece. Dire Tant means so they say, and it's a kind of a throwaway line in the poem, but I turned it into a refrain in the poem, and it was very, very interesting to me that once it got published, it became my first hit. Everyone started doing Dire Tant, and then it was a good thing for me because then they looked back, what else has this guy written? And they found the Madrigali and the Midwinter Songs and 5 psalm settings and a bunch of other stuff too. And it set me on the pathway for other things that showed up almost immediately afterwards, because the next year I was appointed the first composer in residence of the Los Angeles Master Chorale. And their first piece they got from me was Magnum Mysterium. And I followed that up with the Lux Eterna. And then their album got Grammy nominated, and off we went. But Dire Tant, yeah, it's a fun piece. It's a light piece. It's in a duet version and also a choral version. It's so well recorded by you.
Yeah. So this is a fascinating thought. This relationship between this nice, simple, like you said, the French direct thing that also relates to sort of the same kind of Broadway influence of wanting
Yes,
to do that.
absolutely.
Who are your Broadway influences? Like when you think of that great songbook, who are the people that inspired you growing up, or who does now?
Jerome Kern, Richard Rodgers, Oscar Hammerstein. You listen, I go to the Philadelphia area very often. There's a choir there that does my music a lot. I go to Doylestown. Doylestown, Joseph Ort and his choirs are there. I stay every time I go there to a B&B that was Oscar Hammerstein's former home. And I stay in the King and I room usually. The home has got his artifacts in it. It's got his typewriter. And what a great lyricist. Look at all the great shows that he left us, so many of them. And you walk around there and you can hear "Younger Than Springtime, Are You?" or "This Nearly Was Mine," or "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning." On and on and on, all the way to Showboat. And so I love this. Cole Porter, Richard Rodgers, these are my heroes. And they were able to write music that not only is it part of our DNA as Americans, quintessentially American music, but have left us melodies and lyrics that are timeless. They never grow old, ever. They're perfect songs. And that was a great influence on me. And the ability to create a memorable line, melodic line, has been something I've strived for my whole life. And you can see the influence on that in Shining Night and Dire Tant and Prayer and a whole bunch of my stuff.
Yeah.
The melodic line combined with great poetry by fabulous poets such as Neruda, Rilke, and all the rest of them.
Yeah. A question for you that I haven't really had the guts to ask, but I think I grew up in New York City. And I'm thinking about Leonard Bernstein, who wrote all these Broadway shows and was really looked down on by the classical establishment.
Oh,
He was
yes.
dumbing things down. I wonder, like, did anyone ever come after you that same way, or were you lucky because you lived in LA instead of New York? But I just feel like the East Coast sort of wrote off Broadway as not being worth it. And here you are talking about it proudly as your inspiration.
Absolutely.
And is that just you, or is that geography, or?
Here's the deal, and this is for some people to think about. If you're in the arts, you're always going to run into snobbery of various kinds. So many of instrumental musicians and conductors look down on choral music. I mean, it's insane. So my answer to them, okay, so you want to be without the Mozart Requiem or the Brahms Requiem or the Bach and all these kind of things? What's wrong with you? Why the snobbery? And people, for example, look down very much on composers who decide to write film scores. I mean, Leonard Rosenman, a great film classical writer, said that he lost a bunch of his friends when he started to write film scores for James Dean's movies. Or how about this? I'm a composer growing up in the 60s and the 70s and feeling, writing what I felt inside, being very enamored with melodic line and tonality and this kind of thing, in an era academically that was filled with people who thought that if you wrote anything resembling a melodic line or traditional chords, you were dead meat academically, which was true. There were composers that well-known composers that decided towards the end of their life to start writing tonal music, and they wrote me and said they've lost all their friends. They won't even send a Christmas card or anything because the guy wrote something that was memorable. Well, all of that stuff I thought was nonsense. What you do, for you artists out there, you composers out there, you stay true. You believe in yourself. You don't worry about fashion. All of that nonsense that I was just talking about is in the dustpan of history. It's all gone. It's all gone. This is a very, very fine time to be a composer. People have broken down those barriers. They're writing music, pulling in all sorts of sources. Just write. It's all music. Do the best you can. Back it up with craft. Do the very best you can. And plunge ahead. So I plunged ahead. I didn't pay any attention to any of that stuff. I thought it was nonsense. And simply stayed true, wrote what I felt deeply, tried to hone my craft, and plunged ahead. And I say that to all of you who are out there doing that. And I must say, with some sort of modesty somewhere, I have gotten so many letters from composers saying that my music has given them permission to do that. They were afraid to do that. And the Lux Aeterna and the Magnum Mysterium let them know that you can do that. You can write well-crafted pieces that include beautiful lines, counterpoint, and all this kind of stuff that people can relate to very deeply. You ought to see the mail I get constantly from people who say that the Magnum Mysterium, the Lux Aeterna, has changed their life. And there's been a lot of it lately in the past few months. People hanging on to this music because they have lost everything. People who have lost their homes because of fires, their jobs, their kids can't go to school, they have health problems. What can they hang on to? What you listeners right there, you 200 of us out there, and Ethan, they're hanging on to what we do. They're hanging on to stuff that is timeless. Music, great poetry. This is what we hang on to in times of crisis. So anyway, that's an answer to that, a long answer to that particular question. But you plunge ahead. You don't worry about fashion. Fashion comes and goes. You don't fashion your art according to what's trendy, because it's false.
Yeah. Well, here's another chain that you sort of sparked. And I think you know this already, but I'll remind you. At that concert you were talking about where Bruce Brown and Choral Crossties premiered the Chanson des Roses, there was a young pianist sitting in the audience named Naomi Laviolette. And hearing that piece was one of the things that made her want to become a choir accompanist.
And look what she's become now. One of the most gifted musicians I've ever worked with. You are so lucky to have this brilliant, wonderful, gifted woman to be so closely connected with you and your group. And she has become my friend, and I'm very, very honored by that.
I couldn't agree more. And prior to taking over ORS, I had conducted just student ensembles and had student accompanists, which is a wonderful thing. But the student accompanists, just like the other students in the choir, they tend to keep graduating. And one of the joys of working with Oregon repertory singers is not only do I get to build a lengthier relationship over time with those singers, now many of them for 10 years, but I've gotten to work with Naomi for 10 years, which has been a real gift. And so I got super selfish here. I asked her if she'd record the duet version of Dilettante with me.
Right.
And I don't normally sing. That's not my thing. But we got together a couple days ago in her living room. He said it's supposed to be a simple parlor song. So here we are in her parlor. We are trying to stand far enough away for safety in these times. But this was just a joy. So thanks to Naomi for spending an afternoon with me so we could do this. What I do love about the Dilettante song, and the rose is sometimes called the narcissistic flower because it's one of the few flowers where the petals curve inwards instead of outwards. And you found that in the piece, the way the melody Dilettante wraps around itself. And
Yes.
There's a way it can't quite in the duet as it does with all four parts in the choir to have that wrapping, but there's something even more special about just like the two voices. And I just loved, after knowing this piece as a choral piece for so long, to experience it as a duet. So yeah, thanks again for creating this version, and enjoy.
Lovely job. Thank you. That's a lot of fun to do.
Yes, it really was.
That's a lot of fun.
So
good for you both, Naomi. Thank you.
Yeah. We're coming to the end of the night. So for audience folks, if you haven't gotten questions in, this is sort of your last chance to do that. We have one more of your songs to talk about formally that we've got a video of, which is the O Magnum Mysterium. And at the end of the night, if you stay on, we'll play the audio of Sure on This Shining Night from our album, but we don't have any kind of special video content to go with that. I'm looking at one question here. Just people are wondering if, in addition to the list of poets you've set to music, if you have any female poets that inspire you or that you like to read.
Well, I do. I'm great fan of Malay. Her beautiful poems early on. Elizabeth Bishop, absolutely fine. Elizabeth Glick, who just won the Nobel Prize, read her a lot. Patty Ann Rogers, who's in Colorado. Oliver, all the time. Yes, constantly reading women poets. I haven't set any of them as yet, although as a student, I did do some settings of Malay early on, and I may do more of her. I think if I do another song cycle, it'll be on Malay poems, but just very, very fine. A lot of absolutely brilliant women poets out there, and I treasure my many books on their poetry very, very much.
Excellent. So we're going to talk a little bit about the O Magnum Mysterium, and a lot of our audience may have seen this video already, but I mean, I could listen to the O Magnum Mysterium forever, and your O Magnum and the Bibel Ave Maria are the two pieces that I've conducted the most in my life, probably by a mile more than any other pieces in the world, and I'm less tired of them than any of the other pieces too. There's always more to find in the piece. And we decided to take it down the road that you had suggested. And you've talked with our audience about this before, about how seeing the Zurbaran painting in the museum really inspired that piece. So we decided to ask the Los Angeles, or sorry, I'm blanking on the museum. We decided to get permission to use that image in the video, along with some other Zurbaran paintings. But you've talked so much about how poetry inspires music. Tell us how that painting inspired you to write.
Yeah, there's my friend, Dr. Bond from Cal Lutheran, wrote a 7,000-word essay on the relationship of my setting of O Magnum Mysterium to the Zurbaran painting, Still Life with Lemons, Oranges, and a Rose. It is posted. You can read the whole thing. Go to mortenlauridsen.net and go to the In the News section and scroll down, and you'll see the whole thing. It was published in the Choral Journal, and a couple of years ago. Very brilliant, in-depth, and I go into all aspects of this. So imagine this. I'm appointed composer in residence of the LA Master Chorale. They say, for your first piece, will you write a piece for our Christmas concert? And I said, absolutely. And I immediately thought of O Magnum Mysterium, the setting by Victoria in the Renaissance, all those years ago, is as fresh today as the day it was written. And so many other composers have set those two lines of text about the birth of a baby in a manger and the veneration of the Virgin Mary. Alleluia. And so it was my turn to step to the plate. What direction am I going to go? How am I going to do this after following all those other great composers? And about that time, I was on one of my art prowls. I have a very nice collection of art, and I love art. I'm inspired by art, visual art. And so I was at the Norton Simon, and I saw this particular painting by Zurbaran of a bunch of images on a table. And they're ordinary images: a basket of oranges, a basket of lemons, a chalice with water in it, a rose laying on the table against the black background. And I had a very strong visceral reaction to that thing. It was done in the Baroque era, 1600s. I had a very profound reaction that puzzled me to that painting. Took my breath away and couldn't figure out why. And so I'm like a dog in a bone when it comes to these kind of questions. I love it. And I start researching and find out. And the answer lies in the fact that all these objects on the table are highly symbolic. In the Renaissance, the viewers would have known that. They are all offerings to the Virgin Mary. She is the rose. Her purity is shown in the water, in the chalice. The citrons are an Easter fruit. The symbolism of the blossoms on the oranges indicate renewed life. Simple objects against a black background that had a very, very profound effect. And I thought, okay, if this guy can do that all those years ago in a painting, how can I do it on 2 lines of text that would have a profound effect using the very basic materials? And that was a tough one. I worked 6 months on this piece to get it right. It was very tough. Anyone can write a complicated piece, but to pare it down to the essentials, to get to the crux, to the heart of it, to use materials that one doesn't have to wade through. You can have an immediate reaction. It's a matter of eliminating stuff. I always say that I felt like I was in a Coliseum with the whole thing filled with notes. And I ended up with a piece with notes you could put in the palm of your hand. And so it was eliminating, trying to get right to the crux of it. And also, another thing, trying to tie it into history some way. And so I used elements of the high Renaissance. The lines come out of chant. The harmonies are basic. For the most part, this piece is basically on primary chords all the way through. All the elements of other elements of this in rhythm and tempo and dynamics, everything else. The article by Jim Bond goes into all this stuff, so I encourage you to read it. And as I said to your audience when I was discussing this piece, the hardest part of this piece forever for me, that I lost a lot of sleep on, was how, if I'm going to use these kind of basic materials, how do I portray the Virgin Mary suffering from seeing her son murdered? She bore the sorrow of mankind. Virgin Mary, whose womb was worthy to bear the Lord Jesus Christ. Hallelujah. How do I portray that in this particular piece? When I pared it down to very simple material. And then one night lying in bed, it came to me. I said, I'm going to do it with one note. And when you hear it on the word Virgo, the altos have a G sharp. That G sharp it doesn't belong in the key. And it resolves down to an F sharp minor chord. It is the only note, it's repeated again, it's the only note in the entire piece that's out of the key. It shines a sonic spotlight on that word, Virgo, and edifies its meaning. It creates a dissonance on that note. You ought to see the mail I've gotten on that note for the last 20 years.
I've been in your office. You've gotten mail on that note.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a very famous note in the piece, but that's it. And anyway, this piece, they're well over, I quit counting after 100 recordings of this thing. It's all over the world. It's sold hundreds of thousands of people. There's hardly an album of Christmas music that this piece isn't on. And the mail that I get on that, I've had I get honestly weekly letters from people who talk about Magnum Mysterium and how it's affected their life. It was a tough piece to write. And I'm sitting on Walden Island in a shack with no electricity on the shore, on the beach, no electricity, no running water, writing on a $50 piano by candlelight, getting down deep inside myself in this pristine setting on this remote island with 90 people on it, trying to get to, step up and get a handle on Magnum Mysterium. And I remember one day I said, I think it's done. And I put it in an envelope and mailed it off to Solomonovich, the conductor of the LA Master Choir, and I said, Maestro, here's your Magnum Mysterium. Yeah, that was written in 1994.
Yeah, I think you already answered one of our audience questions. But the question is, each line you write captures movement without ever leaving the flow of the song. Who do you look towards for voice leading inspiration? And I'm guessing that's what you just said, that the Gregorian chants is where you're looking to for your voice leading.
Yeah, I'll tell you, you composers listening out there, I have always felt the counterpoint, my studies in counterpoint, as a student were as valuable as anything I've ever done. It's the importance of every note against every other note. How does it fit harmonically, melodically? And you find counterpoint of all kinds in my music. I'm a great believer in combining lines. Secondary lines are very important to me. I look at, for example, you just sang. Look at the secondary line you had in De Re Tone. I mean, it's as good as the top line, and they have to be combined. And so I work a lot on that. There's never a note that I haven't fussed over. This is why it takes me forever to write a piece. I worked on the Lukes for 2 years to get it right. Yeah, but counterpoint and how to tie in those notes with the text. Yeah.
Well, we're going to watch the Magnum Mysterium with the artwork of Zerberon, and then we'll have a final chance for questions and we'll say goodnight. But thank you for taking the time and care to spend the 6 months it took to make the 5-minute piece just perfect.
You're very welcome.
I think you've seen the rewards of it.
Yeah,
thanks. I'm sure all of you have heard the piece. We hope you enjoy it along with the paintings that inspired it.
A beautiful performance. Beautiful, gorgeous. And to see it along with the Zuberon painting was very meaningful. Yeah, bravo.
Thanks, and thank you again for being here tonight. And I guess I would be remiss in not saying to our audience, if you've enjoyed the concert, I hope you can consider making a donation of the price of a concert ticket, or a couple $100,000, or whatever you happen to have lying around would certainly help at this moment in time.
Well, buy the CD. Listen, buy the CD. You've got a fabulous CD of a lot of this music tonight, plus a bunch of other very, very fine Northwest composers that the board and me, we stepped up. We funded this thing. We brought it together to make it available for you, so you can listen to this great chorus in your home. So, Ethan, where should they purchase this? Everybody listening here should have a copy of this CD, and it would help finance this group very, very much. Where do you suggest they buy it?
They could actually go straight to our website. That would be fine. They could come over to my house. I've got some that would during COVID time, but it's at Amazon, it's at iTunes, it's in all of those various places. I'm old school. I'm one of the people who still believes in buying music instead of just listening to it on Spotify over and over again, because it supports the artists. And Skip, thanks for your donations and making the album possible and coming up and playing with us on the
Absolutely.
album.
It was a joy.
And joining us again tonight here on the internet. And you were saying about some of the other artists. The next two episodes of this series, they're going to be 3 weeks apart. So the next one is on Tuesday, November 17th, and features the music of Joan Shimko, who's also a Portland local and is also on that album. And then 3 weeks after that, in early December, you'll have Stacey Phillips, who is not only an amazing composer, but actually a member of Oregon Repertory Singers. Her music is on the album as well. So those are our next two episodes. If you have other suggestions of things you'd like to hear more or less of, if we keep doing those, that would be wonderful as well. But Skip, again, thank you for being such a great supporter and a friend and a mentor, and such a wonderful teacher and inspiration to us all. We're proud to have you as an Oregonian and to have you as part of a team. And our 50th anniversary is coming up relatively soon.
Whoa.
I expect you'll be hearing from us. We released the CD during our 45th year. This was supposed to be our 47th year. So 50 is coming up pretty soon, and I have a feeling you'll be hearing from us again about some other projects.
Good.
So, I think we're going to leave it there, and we'll play the music from Sure on This Shining Night as people can tune in or not. But this is the official broadcast portion ending. So, if you have any thoughts about Shining Night as a farewell wish, but it is the title of our album is drawn from that. I weep for wonder, wandering far above shadows of the stars.
The text, this is very appropriate for this time, because Shining Night, Sure on This Shining Night, where all is healed, all is health. And this is what we're all praying for right now, aren't we? Very big time. For all the Oregonians and everybody else that's coming down with this virus, and for our country to heal up. We're in a big mess right now, and hopefully it's going to get better very quickly. So thank you all. Ethan, thank you for including me in this. It's been great sharing my ideas and thoughts with your choral family out there that's listening in tonight. So I wish you all my very best. And I know our paths will cross again before long in person.
Lord.